Welcome. I'm Sebastian Mahfood, and you're listening to WCAT Radio, the on-air wing of En Route Books and Media, bringing you the dulcet sounds of Catholic wisdom.
Welcome to the Open Door. Jim Hannick and Matthew Bartko here with our friends John Brain, Mario Ramos-Reyes, and Christy Yao. We'll start with a prayer, and then Christy will introduce a special guest and our topic for today. Come, Holy Spirit, fill the hearts of your faithful and kindle in them the fire of your love. Send forth your Spirit, and they shall be created, and you will renew the face of the earth. Let us pray. Lord, by the light of the Holy Spirit, you have taught the hearts of your faithful. In the same Spirit, help us to relish what is right and always rejoice in your consolation. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen. Christy, can you do an introduction and then lead us forward?
Of course. So we have Destiny Herndon-Delarosa here. Is your title president or executive director?
I'm like queen. I don't know.
Queen.
You can call me whatever. Yeah.
Of New Wave Feminists, a pro-life feminist organization. And hopefully we will have CJ Williams of Massachusetts Citizens for Life joining us. So my first question is for you, Destiny. Why should feminists be pro-life? And in turn, why should pro-lifers be feminists?
Oh, great question. And thank you so much for having me on. So I would say that for me, it's really simple. For most of history, women were treated as property. And so this idea that through us gaining rights and liberations, we can, turn around and treat another marginalized human being as property, that doesn't make any sense. I mean, when we talk about kind of patriarchal constructs of the past, a big part of it was this idea that might makes right, that because one person was bigger and stronger and had all the power, they could do whatever they wanted with people who had less power. And so now that we're in the position of having power and liberation and rights, which, obviously I believe that women should definitely have, we're turning around and we're treating the unborn human being in the same way that we were once treated. So for me, it's very common sense that if I believe in an ethic of nonviolence and fighting for the oppressed and the marginalized, I would be pro-life. Likewise, I love how we've seen really in recent years, the pro-life community embrace a very pro-woman narrative. So they are very focused on, the mother and the child as well. I think that we talk sometimes in the movement about this kind of baby saver tunnel vision where you're just focused on, save the person who's in the most danger here, the child that's facing harm. But really, when we focus on loving the woman well, that's when we're the most successful. So that to me is why being a pro-life feminist makes the most sense, because we're focused on both people in this equation.
Very wonderful. And I think we have CJ Williams who joined us.
Yep. Hello, everyone. I made it.
I know you're now working at Massachusetts Citizens for Life. Can you tell me your, title there?
I'm the Director of Community Engagement and the Digital Media Strategist.
Oh, wonderful. Wow. And could you explain CJ? And full disclosure, I was CJ's intern, so she's kind of the reason I am into pro-life feminism, which I'll talk a little bit more about later. But could you explain to us why feminists should be pro-life, and in turn, why pro-lifers should be feminists?
It would be a logical inconsistency to do anything else. To be feminist is to be pro-woman, to protect women, and to celebrate and support everything that it means to be a woman. And abortion strikes at the very root of some of our greatest attributes, which have to do with children, and deny us, really tell us that our worth is based on a decision to kill, which is always going to be demeaning. So to be a feminist, you have to say no to abortion, because it predicates a woman's worth on a heinous decision. And to be pro-life, if you don't support women, why in the world do you care about half the, if you don't care about half the population of the world, hey, why not abort half of them, which is what China does and India does.
All right, so our next question, I definitely have kind of a personal connection to how people can get involved in pro-life feminism. I remember being 12 years old and writing a paper on abortion in my Catholic school and coming across this group called Feminists for Life as I was doing my research. And I ran upstairs and I said, Mom, did you know there are pro-life feminists? Well, yes. They used to meet here in this room. I was a part of Feminists for Life, and we used to host meetings when you were younger. But, most of the people in the group, they got families, they got busy, and it kind of disbanded our local chapter.
Oh.
And so I unfortunately waited about, more years to really get involved in pro-life feminism. A wonderful woman who's on this call took me in as her intern and kind of got involved with the subject.
You were ready.
Thank you. If you could explain to us how people can get involved in pro-life feminism, I guess Destiny first and then CJ.
So how people can get involved? Well, New Wave Feminist right now is trying to start, we're calling them pro-lifetime groups. So they're activist groups in different cities that, a lot of times pro-lifers are great about going out to the March for Life. And we noticed something when we started attending other marches that Planned Parenthood and NOW and NARAL, they're taking their message of abortion out to all types of marches, science marches, anti-war marches, immigration marches. And so we really wanted to see more of a pro-life message out at these. And so we've started planning pro-lifetime groups in local cities because a lot of times we've found that all it takes is having one person with you to where you then have the courage to go out there and be kind of bold with your message. And we have to accept the fact that right now, being pro-life is not necessarily a popular view. Guttmacher just did a study that said, people who say they're pro-life are truly pro-life. People who say they're pro-choice run this huge spectrum of what that actually means. But that has become the default catch-all position because it's just easier to say you're pro-choice. You don't have to argue with anyone. And unfortunately, because of that, we found, especially with a lot of young people on college campuses, they're kind of nervous about getting out there and letting this pro-life message be known. But a really kind of amazing thing that we've found is that when people know that you care, they care what you know. So when they see you out at these other marches, they see you caring about human dignity, for the full duration of someone's lifetime, then they're much more willing to talk to you about life inside the womb when human beings are at their weakest and most vulnerable. And so we've created these groups so that people can come to them and say, hey, we've got this march going on campus for, whatever. It can be any type of thing. Like, we want to try to take a message out there that addresses that march, but also has kind of like a pro-life twist to it. We want to make sure that pro-life people are visible. So that's a big way. And then another way with New Wave Feminist, we do little activity projects if people follow our pages. Like, we've done some hurricane relief by taking feminine hygiene products and stuff to the coast and to affected areas, because a lot of times those are forgotten about when it comes to people evacuating. People will pick up diapers and formula. They're great about that. But a lot of times they forget kind of some of the lady products. And so we really try to supply the different evacuation stations with that. And just all types of service projects. And we really encourage college kids, find something in your community that serves women well and get connected with your pro-choice feminist groups, because the pro-life movement has a way of kind of insulating, right? And we sit and we talk to other pro-lifers and we have these amazing conversations and arguments, and we all have this heart for the unborn and heart for women, but sometimes we don't take it any further because we're a little scared. But the more that we can do service projects with pro-life feminists in our community who are equally as passionate about helping women, the more we can make those connections in other ways. And the really cool thing we've seen come from this is You know, there are pro-choice people who are not necessarily pro-abortion, and they see a woman in a crisis pregnancy, and maybe she doesn't want to have an abortion, but she doesn't know what she needs to do. They will contact us because they know us and they have a relationship with us and they trust us and they know that we can help navigate her through the nonviolent options she has. So the more that we can do things to get in the community and get out there with other people who maybe don't think like us, the more we're able to spread the pro-life feminist message.
All right, thank you so much. That's awesome. And we're going to definitely, my next kind of question peaks on that, connecting with other feminist organizations that might not agree with us and everything. But CJ, how would you suggest getting involved?
Oh my gosh, would love to say ditto everything Destiny said. Love the Lifetime groups, Destiny. That was amazing. Did not know that was on the agenda. Honestly, how can you get more involved with pro-life feminism? Connect with groups like New Wave Feminists. Connect with groups like Feminists for Life. Bring them or their message. Learn how they pose questions. Learn the language so that you can cross borders, because a huge part of pro-life feminism is that it's a term that we've seen is really divisive. People on both sides are like, oh, you can't be pro-life and feminist, or you can't be feminist and pro-life. And as Destiny said, we can be really insular on both sides. So if you want to get involved in pro-life feminism, be a bridge builder. Go out to these events. Don't hide in your hole. Don't stick to the places where people agree with you. And don't be combative. Listen first. Ask questions. I know a lot of people will avoid being involved with pro-life feminism because they have their idea of what it is, and they never go out and actually ask someone who identifies as pro-choice, how do they see it? As soon as you ask the question, you find your common ground. So get involved by seeing where you're already involved and then drawing people in, saying, let's also do this. Both and, not one or the other.
Yeah, wonderful. So my next questions are going to stem from Pope John Paul II's letter to women, which was written at the time of the United Nations Organization Conference on Women. Basically, he had agreements with some of their positions, but he writes in the letter, despite this, that he really does appreciate them, and he really does appreciate what they're doing for women. So it definitely echoes what you're saying, Destiny. I think one of the best parts of this letter is that he wasn't, a term we use today that I don't think was really used in 1995. He doesn't mansplain. He doesn't say, this is what you should do, women. And I'm sure both of you have had this done by both pro-life and pro-choice men. Like, this is what you should do, maybe for marriage and the family. Or this is what you should do for women. He doesn't put all women in a box. He says that women should be respected for the very dignity of their being. And I think it's very kind of prophetic in a way, or really ahead of his time. He talks about how women have been conditioned and how women have been kind of, I'm going to read a quote from here. In societies which are blessed by prosperity and peace, and yet are often corrupted by a culture of hedonistic permissiveness, which aggravates tendencies to aggressive male behavior. He's talking about the injustice of rape in that paragraph. And he's basically talking about rape culture before we're really using the term rape culture. And in kind of the era of Me Too, and rape culture has been on the news a lot. How do you two, as pro-life feminists, kind of address this issue to giving back to the dignity of women and kind of stopping this normalization of sexual?
Well, I would say that, this is something that I had to struggle with kind of early on with my pro-life activism is a lot of times in the pro-life movement, you see, like I mentioned earlier, kind of the fetus tunnel vision. And we don't necessarily look at the root of the issue, like what led a woman to a place where she is now facing an unplanned pregnancy and considering abortion. And a lot of times when we start stepping back, we see a culture that really breaks women from a very young age. And, whether it's through just media and images and advertising and everything else, like young women get this message that they are not enough constantly. So when I go out to colleges, I always talk to kids about the fact that Cosmo magazine is considered a feminist publication, which I think is so ridiculous because you have 20 pages of airbrushed women who nobody looks like that. Even those women don't look like that in real life. You have 20 pages of things that you can buy in an attempt to look like that are just reiterating this belief, your teeth aren't wide enough, your skin's not clear enough, your hair's not shiny enough, you're not thin enough, all of these things that are wrong with you. And then they mix that into this kind of toxic stew with 20 pages of, sex tricks. And here's a way you can get someone to love you. If you don't actually ever get pretty enough or skinny enough or whatever enough, then here's some other way you can get someone to accept you and validate you. And the fact that this is considered, kind of modern day feminism is really horrifying because all it does is fuel a culture of women who never feel enough. And then it kind of placates them with, but here, as long as you use your sexuality as your power, this is what's going to empower you. And this is what's going to validate your existence, right? And make you this strong, independent woman. Well, no wonder we have so many women who then face unintended pregnancies and unfortunately run towards abortion because they feel so broken. I was actually just on a phone call yesterday with a woman who, and I've heard this story time and time again, who's considering abortion because she had a bad childhood. She experienced emotional abuse. And then she turns around and says, I just don't want my child to have that same experience. Well, why would they have that? You can be a better parent. Like, we're here to support you. We're here to help you. But women feel like they can't do better for their kids because they've been so broken by this culture that tells them, you know what, the most merciful thing you can do is have an abortion and not put a child through this because you're so unworthy. You're so not enough. So to Pope John Paul II's point, like, yes, people understanding their human dignity and worth at the core of their being and everything they are, we want that to extend for someone's entire lifetime, for the, teenage girl facing a crisis pregnancy and for the unborn child whose future might be uncertain. We want everyone to understand the human worth of these people and of the teenage boy. I think they also get sucked into this kind of porn culture is what we have now that has normalized violence and degradation towards women. And so women and men both are told, okay, this is completely normal. This is the part you have to play. And of course, it ends up to just emptiness. One of my favorite Pope John Paul quotes, so full disclosure, I'm not Catholic. I believe it's in Theology of the Body, though, and he's talking about pornography. And he says, the problem with pornography is not that it shows too much, it's that it shows too little. And I think that is such a powerful statement because he's talking about, this idea of human dignity. And so it's that you can see all of everybody's skin, but if you don't ever see any of their heart and soul, then you don't really know the person. And the more we can move to a culture that does see the human dignity of every person, I think the more that we're going to save women and children.
All right, wonderful. And CJ, do you have anything to follow up on that?
Not a whole lot, but repeat the question again. I really love questions, and that's where all dialogue begins. So this was sort of an open-ended question, if I recall.
Sure, yes, it was. It was just talking about how in the letter to women, his letter to women, John Paul II really kind of brings up rape culture. And it was, full disclosure, I was 1 year old in 1995, so I wasn't really in the feminist scene yet, but I don't think people are really talking about rape culture. I don't think people are really talking about this kind of idea that our culture is just so toxic with the normalization of sexual assaults. And I was wondering your thoughts or responses to how we can kind of combat that as pro-life feminists.
Yeah. Well, I think it comes, Destiny had great points. I love the quote you used, Destiny. And I love too what you said, Christy, about John Paul doesn't mansplain. And I think one of the things that is really wonderful about that letter that we as pro-life feminists can remember is, one, that not all men are adversaries, and secondly, that it's really good to be in that place of support and recall building the community to treat each other like subjects and not objects. There is a culture that abortion is rooted in, which is the use someone, and it goes from, it hits the vulnerable first. So women tend to be more vulnerable. So not less strong, maybe more vulnerable. And treat women like an object. And then women obviously are going to go and treat children like an object, like objects, and we just go down and down and down and down. And it's one of those things that I think modern feminists just allowed themselves to be co-opted. It's easier to try and be in power than to feel the pain of having been hurt. And we have a culture that normalizes hurting women, like Destiny said. It normalizes abuse. Cosmo is just one long plan for how can you accept the abuse that people want to give you, and play along, which really is the absolute opposite of empowering. So as pro-life feminists, I think it's really good just to continue talking about it and exposing it and saying this is not normal, and promoting something like JP2 and saying this is more normal. This is normal. This is healthy. This is what feminism looks like. So that's about it.
Well, thank you so much. A little in the letter, I'll read a quote from it. He says, "Here I cannot fail to express my admiration for those of goodwill who have devoted their lives to defending the dignity of womanhood by fighting for basic social, economic, and political rights, demonstrating courageous initiative at a time femininity, a manifestation of exhibitionism." I think that's the word. Even a sin. Like many times, you'll meet someone, like, oh, pro-life, like that's so great, and then you'll be like, oh, feminism, and they'll kind of cringe up, and I don't know, you can see their whole body get rigid, like, oh, this girl's crazy, she's gonna burn her bra in my face, like, gotta get out of here. So I was wondering, like, if you guys have any advice or thoughts on how to kind of bridge those gaps between pro-life and feminists, and kind of make pro-lifers realize that no, not all feminists are going around shaming men and burning their bras.
Right.
Like,
that all feminists aren't man haters. And men are feminists. And I wrote a piece for First Things at one point that was about feminism. Isms are only needed when you have like a huge gap in the culture. It's like, otherwise you don't need to emphasize these things. You don't make a feminism or activism and stuff if there's not already a need or a want. So there's a huge gap where women were treated like property and objects, and our laws supported it, up through suffrage. And so we had feminism, and that's an answer to abuse. If there weren't abuse, people would just be feminists without having to use this stupid term. They would just support and value women. So sometimes when I come to a pro-lifer, they're like, oh my gosh, feminists, da, 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 da. And I'm like, dude, everyone is a feminist. We only come up with this term because people went around beating women up and made it societally sanctioned, even holy sometimes. And that sometimes makes them stop. Sometimes it's a little combative and I have to back off. I think also, I just lost my train of thought. I'll let Destiny go if she has anything.
I'll pick your train back up because I liked what you were saying.
Go for it.
Yeah, definitely having, talk about mansplaining. That's where we get it the most is pro-life guys with the best intentions come up and they'll say, I really like your group and your message, but like, maybe you should drop the feminist thing. Like, that's kind of a turn off. And I'm like,
yes.
Oh, let's get away from me. like, and the problem is, I mean, they've already said they like the message. They understand the message. It's a very, consistent message of nonviolence and equality. Like that's what we're fighting for. And so when we realize that usually if people are, kind of bristle at the term feminist, it's because third wave radical feminism has become something that is very radical, and not, everybody in the mainstream wants to jump on board with everything they believe. I always think it's funny whenever you see an actress who's being interviewed and she's asked about, women's rights or feminism, and she'll say, oh, I'm not a feminist. And the feminists everywhere just come out and how dare you? You only are able to do what you're doing. And, all this stuff because you're a woman. Like you see it all the time, right? And yet when I come out and say I'm a feminist, I'm a pro-life feminist, and of course, whenever they're attacking the actress, they'll always say feminism just means equality for men and women. It just means the same opportunities for men and women. And so I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm that. So I come out and say I'm a pro-life feminist, and they're like, no. So clearly it means more than that. They are trying to make feminism synonymous with abortion. And that is where, I'm stepping in and saying, you know what, if we're going to have intersectional feminism that is based on our experiences and things that we've been through and what we've seen in our compassion and our heart and all these things we've lived, I want there to be pro-life feminism, because as a woman who was 16 and pregnant and saw so many of her friends being, coerced and forced into abortions, I see that we need some liberation in this movement, like in this time period. Empower women and let them know they're strong enough and they can have their children. And so we've come in and just created a space. And there, to this day, there's actually a Facebook campaign ad campaign that's going on with this little image that says you can't be a pro-life feminist. And they're spending all
I've seen that.
I mean, it's everywhere. They're spending all this money on it, which I'm like, I'm flattered. I'm taking this as a sign that our message is getting out there.
Seriously, it's getting out there. Yeah.
But you don't know how many women that I meet that, especially, once we got some kind of publicity a couple years ago from some stuff. And so all of a sudden women started coming out of the woodwork and saying, I had no idea I could be a feminist. Like, this is so cool. And so now they're applying that label, and they're getting more involved with, like our tampon hauls for tornado victims. And I mean, just like all types of really cool stuff. They're addressing things like rape culture and what consent looks like and stuff on their campuses that before that they had been a little bit disempowered because they had been told they aren't allowed to be feminists. So I think the umbrella needs to be bigger when it comes to feminism. And I think pro-lifers need to obviously open up their mind on kind of what that means. It's funny because a lot of people, if we have these shirts that say bad feminist on them, that was the running joke, that because we're pro-life, we're bad feminist. And so people will see that and be like, oh, you're a feminist? And then I'll clarify and say, I'm a new wave feminist. I'm a feminist for life. I'm a pro-life feminist. And then they kind of take a step back because they're like, okay, then it goes back into this realm of equality and nonviolence, and it makes sense to a lot of people. So I think sometimes you just need to clarify and open their mind to what feminism could truly be.
Yeah. I think also sometimes I sometimes approach it too with like, you know what, just drop the labels and think about the principles. Do we agree on the same principles? Then who cares what you call it?
Absolutely.
Don't call yourself a feminist. But at the same time, it's like, okay, another great thing is, you know what, feminism began as an attitude of compassion and wholehearted non-discrimination and equality, very anti-abortion. Why are we letting the other side define this term? It's like you have an association now with this because of the nasty feminist. Well, it's up to you whether you accept that association and their definition or whether you remake it. And that sometimes really gives people a turn, especially pro-lifers.
All right. Well, that's wonderful. That's all the questions I have. Thank you two so much for being on here. You really kind of, I think, lightened up the show a lot. So do you have any closing remarks or anything else you'd like to say?
Go out and be badass, pro-living, pro-human feminists. Or don't use the term, but use the principles and act like it.
Yeah, that's what we always tell kids, don't be weird. Just go out there and be normal. Be a regular person who's also pro-life, because a lot of times that wins people over. And then I tell them, if you are weird, just tell people you're pro-choice. We don't.
Oh. All right.
I love your sense of humor, Destiny.
Oh, thanks, friend.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for having us on the show.
These guests. Oh, no, you can't go yet.
Oh, whoa. What?
Didn't Christy say you have to stay? Did she say you could do half an hour and split? No way. No way.
I
Those
don't
are the
know.
questions I had, Jim. They're fast talkers. What can I say?
Well,
you get the point, you go on. Otherwise, you never get the activism done. You can't just talk about these things all day. You got to go do them.
We got more to talk about.
We do have more to talk about. Jim, I have to talk about my chapter's event. Christy, as long as I have the mic, can I?
Yes, but don't let him go.
I will stick around.
And you have.
I can listen. I would love to hear what you're saying, Christy.
I pledge not to indulge in mansplaining, but geezer-splaining, that's another matter altogether.
Uh-oh.
All right.
Geezer-splaining.
All right.
Yellow?
All right.
Are we here?
So the American Solidarity Party of Maryland is co-hosting a conference called... Oh, sorry?
Christy, you didn't let them get away, did you?
We're still here.
They're still here. They're listening to my conference promoting.
Right.
All right.
Before we go on to Maryland's activities, we need to have more discussion with our visitors, don't we?
You can ask me about the American Solidarity Party. I'd be a big fan of talking about that, actually.
Well, can we talk a bit more about what we were talking about? Is that okay?
I guess.
Okay.
Yeah. Did you have any questions for our guest, Jim?
Well, I don't have a question, but I want to make a tribute. When you're doing geezer-splaining, what you have to do is you have to look back a little bit as a geezer to some important history. I wonder if our guests or you, Christy, are familiar with the great leadership begun in the 80s, continuing in the 90s, and continuing of Julie Lesh Wiley, who started a group called Pro-Lifers for Survival. Once upon a time, when the nuclear clock was getting very, very close to midnight, an array of organizations, this group for survival, that group for survival, some other group for survival, and Julie Lesh Wiley started a group called Pro-Lifers for Survival. And I have my hesitations about using the term badass, and that could be only because I've been a dumbass and a smartass. But if there was ever a badass person, if there's ever a Julie Lesh Wiley, and she was very active, has been, and did a lot of work with a woman named Mary Meehan, who's an East Coast person. And first of all, I just wanted to pay tribute to her. And then I wanted to ask a question, and the question is, how is it that we can engage with the powers that be, the people that shape the culture, here and now? And it's a culture that is toxic for women, but it's a culture that's toxic for men as well. And I think, as a philosopher, it's toxic for its sheer lack of literacy, of thought, and how do we push forward? End of question.
Well, I take issue with the fact that we have to influence culture makers. We are culture makers and culture changers. We do not influence them. We act and change society from the ground up. They take direction from what we do. And it's a sort of a victim mentality well, certainly isn't helpful to consider, I've got to change their mind before I do anything. No, I do stuff, and they're going to pay attention when stuff starts changing underneath them. They rely on us. We're the foundation. So we change culture by the way we act, and it's in the small things, day in and day out, And like Destiny was talking about, the conversations she has had with women, who feel pressured or considering abortion, because just those conversations and that connection, that changes the culture, and that brings a greater awareness, that educates. Ultimately, that's the kind of literacy we want too. Literacy in human care and in human connection. Not so much we have so many education, like everyone can have higher learning, but I just finished philosophy, and most of the people in academia, if you ask me, are educated far beyond their intelligence. You can't be that stupid without getting a PhD. And it's like Peter Singer, at, where is he now? Princeton, talking about, you should be able to abort kids up to 2 years old. And if women, this and that, they shouldn't reproduce, sort of thing, eugenicist. And he's been educated far out, way beyond reason. So, anyhow, that's my tirade.
I think that's actually
okay. That's not a tirade. Once upon a time, I wrote a dissertation at Michigan State University, and there were 12 department there. And after a year or so, I asked, "Gee, are there any believers in this department?"
Oh.
And somebody said to me, I think so and so might be. And I wrote a dissertation called "Persons' Rights and the Problem of Abortion," and my director was a very, very much of a feminist, of a sort, not your sort, Jewish background, atheist. Told me as I got started, because I deliberately wanted to engage with her. And this is back in the early 70s. It takes a while to complete a dissertation, that she didn't really know of anybody that hadn't had an abortion or paid for an abortion.
That's not surprising. 1 in 3 women in our age group. Yeah, Destiny
yes.
and I. Yeah.
Well, this was a different age group, I guarantee you. And at any rate, in that dissertation, I had a great deal to say about Peter Singer. Now, what am I trying to get at here? The issues that you raise are incredibly important, as you well know. And what's important is that you keep on raising them. I guarantee you got another 30 years of struggle, and then you get to be in the land of the geezers. And
at that point, I can be an
yes, every single action counts. But it counts in a context, and the context is the context of an established disorder. Our culture is deeply, deeply corrupted, and we have to look for ways to challenge it at every level. And I agree. Who could not agree about Cosmo? But my wife has written for Feminists for Life publications, and what you have to do is, among other things, what we is blow the whistle on the dominant powers. And it's great to have groups that talk about how bad Cosmo is, but I don't think its circulation is going down.
Actually, though, it is. That kind of stuff is not as popular with my generation and younger people. Just for one, they don't subscribe to anything.
Very often they don't read anything either.
Well, depending on what you mean by read, they will read their Twitter feed and snaps all day.
Did they read First Things?
Oh no, I wouldn't imagine so. No. I mean, I do know plenty who do, but general trend, I don't think. So,
it's not the case. Now, I don't want to rant or rave. I want everybody to reflect on what we are up against. And part of what we're up against is a profound disrespect for women. But very often, when I'm out in front of a man pushing the women in to get the abortion, the women are stronger than the men in every regard. It's just that we have a major struggle. And whenever I think about time spent on the American Solidarity Party, I think, well, we're small, we're tiny, but we got something that's absolutely right on, and we have to push for it, and we can't get tired.
Exactly. And, I agree with the let's not get tired, but I don't so much think we need to focus on what we're up against. We need to know what we're up against and then focus on what we have. Yeah. Destiny really described well some of the strengths we have, and we're not going to win by knowing the quote other side really well. We're going to see a change and really positive transformation and holistic acceptance of nonviolence and cherishing of our vulnerable fellow human beings by promoting the glory of human life, by meeting people where they are and loving them, by talking about how we're reaching out, noticing all the good in the world. The more we focus on the people messing up, the more we're going to be drawn into that. It's like people are always going to be making mistakes. People are always going to be mistreating each other. And why waste our time there when we have so much to offer? And our those talents are what will change things, not knowing the other side or strategies.
Let me offer one more point, one more comment, and then I want to get Matthew and John and Mario in on this. Once upon a time, there was a man named Mohandas K. Gandhi.
Mm-hmm. I've heard of him.
What he did was, in many ways, many people haven't. In many ways, what he did was incorporated in the work of Mother Teresa. And my wife and I have had the privilege of working with the missionaries of charity.
That's a privilege.
Well, now, today has Gandhi's way been the way that India has accepted? No, it hasn't. What we have now is a resurgent Hindu nationalism, the very sort of thing that Gandhi opposed. Is this any reason to stop? No, but it does tell us a little bit about the powers that be, and if we're reading John Paul II, then we ought to be reading Scripture, and one of the things that we read in Scripture is the way of truth often becomes the way of the cross, and we can't lose sight of that. No amount of organizing can prevent us from recognizing that we are going to achieve what we achieve chiefly through the grace of God, and that it's a struggle. But I don't know, maybe Matthew, who has a different perspective, or Mario or John, maybe they could jump in here. Or maybe not.
Or not. So what is your point? Because go ahead.
I think what CJ was saying, and I wholeheartedly agree with it, is that especially if we're going to be doing work under the name Solidarity, it's not so much as seeing the pro-choice side or the pro-war or the pro-death penalty, or regardless of what life issue you want to talk about, our interlocutors aren't so much our opponents as fellow human beings whom we're also trying to help.
Yeah.
So by focusing on the positives and by building up, rather than focusing on a taking sides oppositional mindset. I mean, in our culture, we certainly do have a view of dichotomous positions on any issue you want to mention. But I think by acknowledging each other's mutual humanity and really focusing on solidarity, there's a path to move forward in a healthier way, where we can really listen to those who disagree and even to those who agree, and internalize what they're saying to understand their point of view before trying to move forward together. Because if we can do that, if we can reach that point where we understand what their pain points are, where we understand what their priorities are, and then move forward with them, we've made an ally out of an opponent.
Very well said, Matt.
I see Mario's flickering.
Yes. I have precisely, I'm sorry, my voice is not the best today, but I think the issue with our culture is everything become ideology. Everything becomes seen from an ideological perspective. And we are missing really what a human person is with a heart. And for us, generally, we don't see the other as a good. And so in that sense, we don't engage in a dialogue because our way of conveying our message go through our ideological lenses. We miss that person. And something is happening right now, historically and internationally in Latin America, where there are countries traditionally Catholic who are moving toward approving abortion laws in Argentina, in Peru. And one of the things that are happening, and I have a question about that, is that the term feminism, even among pro-lifers there, carry a negative connotation. In other words, feminism seems to mean for them gender feminism, where you construct your own identity and everything that comes with that. So generally pro-life don't want, women pro-life don't want to call themselves feminists just because they think that the term feminism carry an ideological meaning. My question is, how then we can convey that that's not the case? What is the best way to spread the voice that there is such a thing as pro-life feminism?
Yeah, that's a great question, Mario. We actually have a group in Argentina and in Mexico City right now of pro-life feminists. And they set up about 6 months ago, have been doing TV and radio interviews, have been going to all the pro-life marches. And the strength in what they're doing is, as you said, abortion rights have become synonymous with a secular worldview, and being anti-abortion has become synonymous with religion. And, while there are certainly religious people who are anti-abortion, it goes so much larger than that. There are secularists, there are humanists, there are people who, just subscribe to science, and that's their reason for being pro-life. And so we have to make sure that we represent this wide spectrum, because at the end of the day, we have to shift the cultural consciousness of everyone. So not one religion, not one political party, but everybody. It has to be just like, murder or racism or any of these other things that as, a global community, we see, okay, this is wrong. We shouldn't treat people this way. We want to move abortion into that same spectrum. So the issue with, we saw it also in Ireland, the same thing happened. There were people who were not necessarily pro-choice or pro-life, but they were voting against the church in Ireland. And that is why they believe that they've legalized abortion over there. So in Argentina, they were proposing a law that would legalize abortion, and thankfully it did not pass. But what was really cool, our feminist group down there, they said, you know what? Our job isn't over here. The fact that there was such an outcry for abortion tells us that there's a need in this community with these women. So what is it that they are not getting? Because one of the things my group focuses on, we say, there's a lot of people working to make abortion illegal. We want to make it unthinkable. We want to make it something where it is not an option. Violence towards another human being, especially your own child, should never be something that's at the forefront of a woman's mind. And so how do we change the societal pressures that might move a woman towards choosing abortion in the first place? And so the groups in Argentina are going into the slums. They're talking to parents there. They're helping support mothers because, a lot of the stuff they're seeing down there is stuff we don't have here in America, where literally they are living in such poverty and squalor that if she has this baby, she fears that her born child, her 2 and 3-year-old will die because of malnutrition. So we have got to step in and be that pro-life community to that woman as well. And the really cool thing is when you have it coming from a secular perspective, then the other side can't just say it's a religious issue and stop trying to put your theology on me. And so I think that's where this component fits in really well. We also set up a LGBTQ pro-life group down there. So we're trying to diversify the pro-life movement so that it's much harder for the other side to say this is just a religious argument. We want people to understand it's religious, it's an ethical, it's a moral, and it's a scientific argument as well.
It's a human rights issue.
It's a human rights issue. Amen.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you both so much for that response. I see that we are down to about 11 minutes left in the hour, and I do really would like to hear what Christy was going to say about the upcoming, I think, very relevant to our topic of life event in Maryland.
Yeah, let's hear that. Wrap it up.
All right. Well, thank you. Well, it's coincidental that you would mention the pro-lifers against kind of nuclear detonation, because the American Solidarity Party of Maryland is hosting or co-hosting a conference at Goucher College that's 2 minutes to midnight, what we can do to prevent nuclear war, with a host of other groups in Maryland to kind of strategize and talk about what we can do to promote a more peaceful world. So, yeah.
That sounds really neat. Great opportunity for intersectionality and partnership there.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And Christy, if any of our listeners are in Maryland, how can they register?
They can register by, I would check out our Facebook page, the American Solidarity Party of Maryland, or email us at solidaritymd@gmail.com, and I'll send you the link.
Thank you. And just to give CJ and Destiny an opportunity, are there any comments that either of you would like to make about the American Solidarity Party and the ongoing efforts to bring a consistent life message to American politics?
I would just say that any effort that diversifies our political landscape is absolutely necessary at this point. And I'm really grateful for what the Solidarity Party has done in terms of integrity towards principles, and not pushing party-wide so much as really wanting to serve the community. And anyone, I would just say, if you're in Maryland, head out to this event, please.
Yeah, and I'll add that over the summer, I have the pleasure of actually talking to an American Solidarity group. The week after I talked, I spoke at Democrats for Life. And I saw two groups of people who, probably one would fall more liberal and one would fall more conservative, but had so much in common. And it reminded me of a time when that's how politics used to be. We might have different ideas of how, strategy, how to go about something. But at the end of the day, we all cared about human beings. And it really took me back to this place where we used to be able to work together before we were so divided. And now our political parties have us compromising so much with inside the party. We've used up all of our compromise, so we're no longer willing to compromise with the other side. And I love how the American Solidarity Party gives us back that consistency that we need so that we aren't having to compromise within our own party, and we are much more willing to work with the other side on issues. So you guys keep up the great work. I would love to see this party become enormous.
Thank you so much. And actually, I misspoke before. I wanted to clarify. It's marylandsolidarity@gmail.com. So please email me if you're interested.
Jim, do you have any updates on the upcoming convention in California?
Yes, it's coming up soon, November 10th. We're going to be meeting in Visalia, which is in what's called the Central Valley. And we're meeting there because our most successful candidate the last time around was Brian Carroll. And I'm happy to report that while he hasn't displaced Devin Nunes, he did beat the Libertarian candidate there, which is something I think worth mentioning. Also, Solidarity Front, with a little bit of good luck, I've been able to work with a young man named Joseph Soto, who is running for mayor of Inglewood, where I live, Inglewood, California. And I think he's very sympathetic to what we have to say, and I think that he's going to be with us next week. interesting in terms of, here's my theme for the day, what we're up against. Who's the incumbent? The incumbent is a fellow who, well, he's got just the right background, doesn't he? Recently moved into the city, former chief of police. Current chief of police under his administration is somebody who makes more than the sheriff of Los Angeles County. Where is the money really coming from for the incumbent? Why, we now have 2 National Football League teams. We used to be called City of Champions. Now we can call ourselves Concussion City, and a thriving casino. So these are full opponents. I don't expect Joseph Soto, the person that we're supporting, I don't expect him to win, but I expect him to get said what needs to be said to the powers that be. What else?
Excellent. So I think that we have a lot coming up in the coming year. I know that Monica, our head of electoral efforts for the American Solidarity Party, is working with a number of candidates across the country to try and not just finish 2019 strong or 2018 strong, but really get involved in some local races in 2019. And then, of course, we'll have another round of larger races in 2020. For anyone who's interested in getting more involved with the American Solidarity Party, the website is www.solidarity-party.org. And there you can join us and also contact the party to express interest in supporting candidates, interest in running, or any of the number of other various ways that you can get involved with your local state chapters or with the party more generally. There also happens to be a big red donate button if you'd like to help out financially, and the other red button is the join us if you'd actually like to become a member of the party.
Ooh, look at that red button. Whoa.
I really want to take a chance to thank Destiny and CJ for being with us today. I think your voices and, more importantly, your examples in your activism are a inspiration to many of us, myself included. To wrap up the show, we have about another 3 minutes left. If either of you wouldn't mind commenting on just a person or two that you follow in the movement or that you take your inspiration from as you watch them being activists in the country right now.
Looks like CJ is with us.
Or if we're having microphone problems, that's not a problem either.
Oh no. Can you hear me?
There we go.
Okay, I am on. I was going to say, just off the top of my head, people who I really, really appreciate their efforts and their consistency and nonstop, really activist work. Pro-Life San Francisco is just doing amazing work. And I love following Karen and Teresa there and collaborating with them. And I have to say, Reggie Littlejohn and her work on gender side has been really amazing.
Excellent.
I don't know about Destiny. I obviously definitely keep in touch with Destiny as far as things go.
She's inspiring to watch. Christy,
I love this. Yeah.
Christy, is there anyone in particular you'd like to highlight?
Is Christy gone too?
Sorry, no, I'm here.
She can't be gone.
Our youngest panelist woke up from his nap, so I was
double checking that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, no, he's on me. I would say definitely Feminists for Life. I'm a big fan of them. Rehumanize International.
Oh, we got another comment.
Rehumanize International, as I talked about last week. Yeah, they do amazing, consistent. The Consistent Life Network is great. They have a great grassroots campaign for nonviolent healthcare options. So, yeah.
All
All
right.
right. Thank you.
Head out.
We've
Thank you for having me.
come to the time for our closing prayer, Matthew.
Go right ahead, Jim.
This is from the epistle from this morning's liturgy. It's St. Paul to the Ephesians. Brothers and sisters, I, a prisoner for the Lord, urge you to live in a manner worthy of the call you have received, with all humility and gentleness, with patience, bearing with one another's love, striving to preserve the unity of the Spirit through the bond of peace, one body and one Spirit, as you are also called to the one hope of your call, one Lord, one faith, one baptism, Father of all, who is over all, and through all, and in all. The word of the Lord. Amen. Come, Lord Jesus. Thanks to everyone. We'll be back next week, same time, same place.
We hope you enjoyed the program and will join us back for another show on WCAT Radio. This is Sebastian Mahfood. Good day.